Well, good day, everyone, and welcome back to our Fireside Chat series. My name is Steven, and I'm the host of today's show. Joining me today is our special guest, Brian Beckwith from Intuitus, where he leads science and engineering as the CTO. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, before we get started, just want to let everybody know that we're going to try to get to some questions here at the end of the session. So anytime during the session, feel free to chat in those questions as you see fit. Now, Brian, I'm sure our listeners would like to learn more about you and your role at Intuitus. So, can you share a little bit more about what you do over there and what Intuitus is all about?
Sure. Look, I'm the chief technology guy here, right? I'm the guy in charge of all of the nerdy stuff here at my organization. But within that, I get to do all kinds of cool things. And so our company is we're a full service cybersecurity company, and we provide all kinds of consulting services as well as managed detection response services. We have a 24/7 SOC, those kinds of things. So our company's kind of split into two different sides, I guess, which are two different focuses. One, that consulting side, and the other one's kind of basic operational side of cybersecurity. Um, so really excited to do what we do, passionate about protecting people and doing that. We have a couple of industry focuses, right, or verticals which we deal with in our organization. And one of the things we'll be talking about today really is this 911 call centers, 911 emergency services in general. So happy to be here and talk about those things. Again, it's something I'm really passionate about, and our company has taken it on as a major focus.
Well, thanks. That was awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So now, before we get started with our regular session, I always kind of like to talk about just some of the latest things that have been going out there in the industry. And so let me pop up a few things here for the
Sure.
audience. So let me share this out real quick. And so, as we can see, I think that we all agree there's lots of hackers out there today, and they're taking advantage of, these various municipalities. And so here we can see, and I think folks, everybody can see that,
Yeah.
yeah, we can see that, here at Dark Reading, hackers paralyzed the 9/11 operations in Suffolk County, New York, and that was back in 2022. And then, as we progress into it was May, I think, 2023, around that time frame, where another ransomware attack had affected the Dallas police operations. And another one, obviously, this was a little bit the next day as things were progressing in the city of Dallas. That ransomware attack also disrupted the 911 call center, the courts, and the water systems. And then I think this is probably one that's like top of mind for everybody out there today is the cyber attack cripples the Bucks County 9/11 Communications Center. And then, like, for example, local governments in Colorado, Pennsylvania, Missouri dealing with ransomware attacks. So I think it's pretty clear that the theme is organizations, individuals attacking, these municipalities. And I really don't think it's necessarily they're really trying to cause loss of life or anything like that. It's primarily financial based. And I'd probably guess that you would agree with that, Brian.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Although the impact is much more significant, right? Like the impact is the potential for loss of life. Anytime, an emergency service is interrupted, you have that potential for something really disastrous happening, right? In particular, the thing that we talk about the most is loss of life, right? But you can think of a nation state threat actors or a number of folks that are really have interest in interrupting 911 or interrupting emergency services in general. And so our job is to look out for those things. So,
Mhm.
protect from those things. And there's a couple of different organizations that kind of manage all of that. I want to say, 911 call centers and how those organizations operate and how they do their, run the business of handling 911 calls and dispatching services and all of that. So the NINA organization in particular is one that I'm affiliated with the most. They have APCO is another one that is related to that. Yep, the NINA organization. I end up I'm in one working group and or I volunteer for one working group and the chair of this a thing called NINA ICE, which is an interoperability event that I do every year. So I kind of represent cybersecurity for those things. I'm the chair for that planning committee this year for NINA ICE. But you know, PSAPs, they're managed and organized through things like NINA. Even though it's a state-run organization, you have these bodies that kind of control that. And one of the other working group that I sit on is we're rewriting the standard for cybersecurity for next generation 911, right? So we've had these legacy systems that have now are turning into a more IP-based solutions, um, which is um, which is opening up a new world for 911.
Right.
So
Right. And you use
I can
the,
talk. Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say you use the acronym PSAP. So just for the
Yeah,
audience, Public Service Answering Point. I actually had to look that up myself because I've seen
yeah,
it on your website. I'm like, PSAP. I've heard a lot of acronyms in my time, but I hadn't
yeah,
heard that one before.
yeah.
So damn, thanks for that.
So think about that's a PSAP is a 911 call center.
Mhm.
Uh, and those call centers, I mean, if I can get geeky for a second with you, they're divided up into really three network segments.
Okay. Yeah, I was
One
going to ask you
is
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, one is, and the most foundational piece is the call handling side of the organization, right? So think about that's where all the actual phone calls come in, and traditionally that's been POTS lines, right? Regular,
Right.
plain old telephone service, but those are all converting over to SIP based traffic. Most everything is, even if it's got a POTS line, it gets converted to SIP. SIP is an IP based
Right. Right. Session
solution,
is,
and
yeah.
then those get then divided up and handled by a variety of different equipment that manages those calls, records the calls, puts stuff into databases, and there's this whole back end infrastructure that happens around call handling, is what they call that, right?
Yeah.
And that's an isolated network too. Most of that is walled off or cordoned off. But that's one of the vulnerabilities of these call centers right now, because look, they have been traditionally so isolated and segregated from the rest of the world, right? That no, like almost no internet connectivity into
Right.
those things, right? On purpose, much like what you would see in like an oil field or something like that, where you have to have
Right.
um, an industrial control system type of environment. But you also have these, the other two networks, right? Is the CAD network, which is what we call computer aided dispatch, right? So think
Right.
that's where they're once they take the call, they have to send that off to emergency service providers, which go through a number of different things, whether it's police or fire or ambulatory services, that kind of things, right? And then you have the administration side of things. So they're typically three different separate networks, sometimes more connected than they really could be or should be. And that's where some of the trouble comes in. Most of the ransomware attacks that you see happen at that CAD side of the environment. So those are usually connected to like a county organization or something like that, right? So
Mhm.
the CAD side of it is, so there's an inroad or place for a mechanism for them to kind of come in and potentially threaten that environment. But what
Right.
ends up happening is if that CAD site goes down, then they're like, okay, how is this affecting call handling? How is this affecting administration? And some of the I want to say most of the organizations don't really have a good handle on where those touch points are.
Right.
And then what actually is there. So they end up shutting down one because they're not, afraid of how they're going to connect into the other. And then you have these massive downtimes. They might even be able to answer a call, but don't have a way to dispatch it, right?
Yeah, can't get out
That's
the other
right.
side to
Can't do
actually
the
get
other side
somebody,
of things.
get
So
somebody, some trucks rolling
so a
or
ransomware attack like that, super impactful, right?
right.
Even though it might seem not so much, right? Like, oh, it's only affecting this one part of the organization. It actually is affects call handling, and then it has to roll off to some other organization or something like that.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you think the attackers understand sort of this? Because when you think about industrial control systems, right, in these industrial
Yeah,
environments, one part of the network, sort of the administration part, connected to the internet,
yeah,
the other
yeah.
part not connected to the internet, and you got the human machine interfaces sort of
That's
in
right.
between that give this multiple point connectivity that could definitely be a point of vulnerability or a point of
Yeah.
exploitation for sure. And so do you have a feeling that these attackers know what to target, or are they just sort of spraying and praying and seeing if whatever they can hit and see if they can cause enough chaos to sort of incentivize an organization or a municipality to pay the ransom?
I would say, look, I would say your typical threat actor, the ones that are running most of these ransomware attacks,
Hmm.
no, I don't think they understand the connectivity between all of that stuff. I
Right,
don't think they don't really care, right? That's not their intent. A nation state threat actor, on the other hand, does care,
right.
and they would be after that kind of interconnectivity and those threat vectors or those points of ingress or egress out of one of those organizations is really what we have to protect against,
Right,
right?
exactly.
And on the CAD side of things and the admin side of things, look, email, all of your traditional threat
Right.
vectors you have there, right? It's the user. For the call centers, those threat vectors are really like support staff coming in and
Hmm.
bringing with them some kind
Yeah,
of
all the office applications, the email, the phishing, all the other types of attacks, potential. Yeah, it's all certainly on
all of
that.
that stuff for the CAD and
Mhm.
admin networks, sure. But when you have those isolated networks,
Right.
what your threat vectors are your vendors that get into those and
Wow.
provide support services for that equipment, like being able to understand what's going on. And one of my major roles is to monitor the network traffic and look for anomalies and that, but also use a product like yours, right, to come in and really analyze where all of those threat vectors are and what are the vulnerabilities inside of that, just in case somebody does get in, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I love this graphic of ours that
Yeah, yeah. I saw this on your website. I was like, I got to pull this up and maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the things that you folks are doing here. I mean,
yeah,
it's, this whole security operations center as a service with managed detection and response. I was like,
yeah.
very intriguing. I'm very interested in learning more about this.
Yeah, so I'll start from the center and move out maybe.
Okay. Okay.
When I'm when I'm pitching this, right, or when I'm kind
Yeah.
of explaining this to folks, um, it's a combination of people, processes, and technology, right? It always rolls down to those things. You have to have people trained and understand all of the threats that are there in the environment, right? You have to have processes to protect yourself from those. You have to have all your documentation set up. You have to have your mindset in the right place, right? And then you have to employ technology to help you with your policies and your processes and those kind of things, right? So at the heart of what we do, we employ technology, we employ people, we do, help with processes. That's why you kind of need this full service cybersecurity, right? Like you need somebody that understands all of those components to really provide a robust cybersecurity solution.
Right.
When we rock in, when we walk into an organization, when we start to talk to them about, what do we need to do? Well, it goes around these, if you look around the perimeter of this, we use technology to help us get to that, employing, security incident event management solutions, protocol analysis, packet capture, analyzing all the packets that are going on and finding out what's normal, what's not, and then reporting out on that, fixing issues that we detect through that. Using a tool like yours, right, to bring in and understand where those threat vectors are, where those vulnerabilities that we have in the environment, and actually practicing against those. Beautiful. It's a beautiful way to bring technology to bear in these. But you also have to have people watching over and looking after things. Like we don't just deploy a tool like Horizon 3, that has. We have people that stand behind that,
Right.
technicians and staffing that understand what those things mean and how to actually take and use those to help mitigate issues that go on in the organization.
Well, it's
Right.
more than just a tool, obviously.
Yeah.
It's equipping people with the right tools to
Yes.
to come out with the outcome that you're looking for. So interesting. And I really would love to explore a little bit more just what your thoughts are on how you're using Horizon 3, our Node Zero technology in this whole realm, right? Because we're just one piece of the puzzle here.
Sure. Well, obviously we use it as an internal penetration testing tool or
Okay.
a way to do vulnerability assessment, right? We analyze vulnerabilities. Our our partners, we help them. Our partners in this 911 space in particular, we help them to um, in their lab environments as they're developing the software and stuff that gets deployed at these data centers or at these call centers, right?
Hmm.
Help them to make sure that it's um, everything is okay before you go and deploy. But
Right.
after it's deployed or another vendor, or once you get the interoperability of all these other vendors in there too, you might expose some threat vector, right? And so what we're using it is to go about discovering where those threat vectors might be, and then making improvements and arrangements and that to mitigate those issues. So we use it internally, but we also use it as an external threat analysis tool as well. So we'll do an external pen test as well to see what outside entities have access to as well. Most of the call handling centers, right? So again, if you divide this up into three different sections, the call handling, what you would call kind of the ICS side or the industrial control system kind of side of
Right.
things,
Exactly.
right? That side of it, we're testing IP addresses of vendors, technology, and those kind of things to make sure that there's no vulnerability get into that network that's supposed to
Right.
be, you know, um, you know, cordoned off, right?
Isolated, right.
Isolated, exactly.
It's
Making
isolated,
sure
but
it's
there's a
still
lot of
isolated
connections.
as much
Yeah.
as we expect it to be, right?
Right.
But then on the CAD and admin side too, you can use that to expose threats and vulnerabilities there. Look, you should have endpoint protection. You have all these
Right.
defense in depth kind of actions, right? You should also have your role-based access control all configured and set up. And how do you test against passwords? And like, are people that have access to these things using the appropriate things, not using default passwords and
Right.
all of that? Your tool is awesome for that. One of the best in the industries, right? I ran it on one of our organizations once, and there's this like roundabout way that made it happen. Like there's this vulnerability that was there, but it exposed vulnerability, which then wrapped around and used that vulnerability and use passwords from that vulnerability to get into this other thing. Like
Right.
it's a sweet tool, and it's something it would be very difficult for me to have just one of my pen testers go out and accomplish in a short amount of time what I can do with that tool as a baseline for any threat analysis that we do in an organization. So it's been a godsend for us, really. It takes a lot of the time and energy away from where my pen tester has to focus, right? He can focus on the things that take a little more hand holding, I want to
Right.
say, managerial layer 8 stuff, right? Like that where it's a little more challenging, right?
So what were you doing, or how were you doing penetration tests. I'm guessing it was human driven, pretty much manually driven before you were introduced to our Node Zero products. So I imagine that was challenging to say the least.
It is like, look, there are a ton of tools out there available to you, and even open source tools that, they're all available to you. But organizing those tools in a way and running them, and even the manual process isn't really that manual, right?
Mhm.
But it takes time and energy and focus, and you have to go through this iterative process, and you miss steps and all of that. You just don't. We don't miss steps with this, right? We
Right.
follow it. It's got a great processes that are associated inside the tool that help us have consistent results in how we go about doing things. You're not worried about a pen tester making a mistake, right? From the general perspective, right?
Hmm.
The foundational part of it is all taken care of through the tool. Then we augment that with a pen tester to take it to the next level, right?
Right.
And be very specific about the types of environments that we're going into, right? Understanding those threat vectors.
Well, it goes back to this sort of cyber risk assessment. I mean, there's a really common theme that's going on right now
Yeah,
where legislation from not only over in the EU, but also here in the US that are consistently talking about this continuous cyber risk assessment approach. And so, what are your thoughts on, for example, like municipalities? I mean, is there any movement to say, yeah, you need to utilize technologies and organizations like Intuitus to assess your
yeah.
environment so that we can find these risks? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like I sit on
Nina, I was just going to ask you
this
about that.
NINA
Yeah.
committee, right? Or I would say it's a working group, right? So there's a handful of us that are putting together this standard, and we're basing it all off of industry-based best practices in the first place, right? Your NIST standards, CMMC. There's a whole a plethora of different standards that you can look at, but they're all coming down to the same thing. Look, if you're not doing it, then you're not doing it right, right? If you're not assessing your organization, you're not really doing it right. So, a new standard gets released in NINA shortly. We've been working on it really for a couple of years. It'll be released probably within the next 3 or 4 months.
Mhm.
Um, we've already gone to public, what they call public review with it, and we're ready to go out.
Right.
But CJIS, the one that the criminal justice systems, so think of it, anybody that's in the criminal justice, they just, and was October of last year, said, hey, look, there's a mandate for doing an assessment or a vulnerability assessment inside of organizations to make sure that you're up to up to their standard. So everybody's recognizing, I won't say everybody, but like the industries are recognizing that this is a requirement. You have to validate, you have to verify, right? Look at what Ronald Reagan, who he brought it from, the Russians, right? That says trust
Right.
but verify, right? That's really,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. And I love your tagline too, right? You have that same kind of mentality behind it, but it's really that. Look, I'd love to trust the organization, but what everybody, what the big movement the last couple of years have been zero trust, right? No
Right.
trust. There is no
Don't trust
trust.
anything. Right.
So there is only verify, you
Yeah,
know.
well, there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of differerences, and I think that people are beginning to understand is that traditionally it was like vulnerability scan. Okay, you scan your
Yeah.
infrastructure, you find all
Yeah,
these
there's
vulnerabilities, you got hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of potential vulnerabilities, and you don't know whether they're exploitable or not, right? And that's one of the things that I hear consistently from the users of our technology is that once we run an autonomous pen test, with Node Zero autonomous pen test, we know exactly what is exploitable and we know what to focus our mitigation actions on. So are you seeing this same kind of thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I want to say, look, a vulnerability scan is different than a penetration test.
Mhm.
What I love about the Node Zero product, it really, you kind of get the best of both worlds in that it's not a full-fledged vulnerability scanner. It's not designed for that, but
Right.
it's these are the vulnerabilities that are exploitable. These are how we can go about and using the technology to take what we know is out there and available, right, to be exploited, to say, hey, look, do you have easy exploits? Do you have things that are out there already that are exploitable, and even not so easy things like your the password tool that you have, that's
Yeah.
included in that as well.
Yeah.
That's not
Or
just a
ADI.
vulnerability. Like that's not a vulnerability scan. That's
Mm,
let me see what you're doing with that. But you also take those default passwords and those kind of things are wrapped into it as well. So
yeah.
yeah, a
Or
vulnerability scan is great. Fine. You need to mitigate vulnerabilities, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that those vulnerabilities are exploitable either. And the Horizon tool, no zero is great for saying, okay, these are the ones that are exploitable, and this is what we need to really test against and validate against.
yeah, we just released our phishing impact test capabilities, right? So
Yeah,
what we do is we integrate with sort of the training tools, right? The phishing training tools where you're
sure.
training, your general staff about phishing, et cetera. And one of the gaps was that we don't know what happens when a credential actually gets phished, right? And so we can integrate into those training tools where you're kind of phishing your employees to see if they'll enter their credentials. And now
Sure.
we have this integration into these various tools where now you can say, okay, one of our users entered their legitimate credentials, and then Node Zero receives those credentials and goes and sees what it can do next inside of the infrastructure. So, have you had any experience with that, or is that something you folks are thinking of?
Oh yeah. Look, we've used phishing campaigns in the past. They're
Mhm.
part of our process, part of
Right.
our consulting practice that kind of it integrates with our operational practice as well, right? So we haven't used the Horizon product yet. We're excited to do it. It'll probably we're gonna do some testing with it probably this next month and pull it up in our lab and
Very
work on
cool.
it for ourselves, and then go from there. But yeah, it's a fantastic, fantastic product.
So we just got a few more minutes left, and so
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you this: what's coming next for Intuitus? Where are you guys taking the organization? What's some new things that are coming, or fine tuning some of the things that you're currently doing now?
Yeah, look, the big push is really to look. We have a couple different verticals in our organization. Healthcare
Right,
vertical is big for us. We have a big
right.
push towards that. Some of the partnerships that we have with other organizations, Sophos and those kind of things, the partnership that we have with those are great. But really is we got to get 911 call centers protected, right? And the push is that really the focus is that for our organization right now. We've won a few good contracts. Big contract on the West Coast here where we are. We're in Seattle area. Um, and then contracts in Canada and East Coast, and um, yeah, there's quite a bit that we're working on and really honing in on that. Focusing on TDOS is another way, telephony denial
Yeah, telephone
denial of
denial of
service.
service. Yeah,
It's a big
yeah.
focus for us as well, being able to catch when that's occurring. It's a difficult challenge right now. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everybody always just thought that 911 services would just work fine, work perfectly, right?
Yeah.
And never would think that somebody would be able to take a system down like that. It's certainly very, very concerning, especially in the context of TDOS, right? Telephony denial of service or telephone
That's
denial
correct.
of service.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can take down infrastructures with that, right? So big, big, big concern out there today.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I know we're just up, maybe another minute left here. So, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience? Any, expert guidance? You've got years. I think you said you have 25 plus years experience in the industry.
Yeah,
That might
actually, I
help.
should update my profile there because it's
Yeah, as the
closer
years
to
go on, that
30,
25,
30, 30,
that
like
25 is,
33 years or whatever what it is. Yeah.
yeah. So, any
Um,
final thoughts that you want to share with the audience? Anything leave
um,
behinds?
yeah, like, look, threat actors are there. They're and not to scare anybody, but look, you got to protect yourself. You have to do vulnerability scans. You have to do what you got to do to protect the environments that you're in. And please reach out. Like if you need some help, some consulting, you want to just talk through some stuff, happy to reach out and do most of that stuff early on. Like if we kind of give some of those services away just to
Right.
get people in the door really for us, but I'm happy to help the community and move forward. We're again passionate about protecting this world's infrastructures and those things that keep people safe. So, um, and thank you
Yeah.
for inviting us to talk about it. And that's where our heart is, and hope to help more people moving
Well,
forward.
that's yeah. What's interesting is that there's so many of us that have been in this industry that really put their whole lives and their whole
Yeah,
energy into securing our world, right? And
yeah.
certainly, want to thank all of your efforts, and certainly want to thank you for joining myself today, Mr. Brian Beckwith with Intuitus, and thanks everybody for joining.
You
All right, take care now.